Welcome back to the Be in the Room live series where we are on episode 15 out of 20. We are going live every weekday for the month of January to bring you the tools that are going to help you to stop shrinking and to start leading with purpose. Of course, I'm your host. For those of you who are newer to me, my name is Laura Morrison. I am a certified business and leadership coach. I'm also a leadership facilitator, which is why this work is important here, because these are the tools that we're walking through, the concepts that we're walking through from a leadership perspective are not just the things that are going to help you to these are the things that companies are investing their leaders to learn. These are the things that people, leaders themselves, are investing in for themselves in order to get their game up to the next level. Because if you've been following this along all the way, what you're noticing is how cerebral leadership is. And it doesn't matter if you're leading yourself or if you're leading hundreds or if you're leading tens. Either way, leadership is cerebral, and it requires a lot of internal shifting, a lot of internal auditing, and it requires a lot of internal awareness and control in order to navigate through things strategically. Today, we are going to be expanding on that. We're going to be talking all about hard conversations and boundaries. Now, the reason why we're going to be talking about that today is because I once read a quote by Tim Ferriss in 4-Hour Workweek, which I love. And it's like, your level of success is dependent on the number of hard conversations you're willing to have. And this is so incredibly true, which is why we're going to show you exactly what the strategy and the business of hard conversations and boundaries are. Because it's not just about protecting your peace. It's not just about being zen. It's not just about healing. This boundaries is a business. Hard conversations is a business because your brain is a business. So let's say hello to some people. All right. Welcome. Good morning, Layla. Hi, Self-Healing with Steph. We got Polo. Kevin, of course, is here because he's my favorite and he loves me. Trishan, welcome. Oh, you can't find episode 14 because I didn't post it. I will post it after this live here. Thank you so much. Kevin. I was looking for the baddest bitch in the room, and here you are. Okay. Welcome, Nini, Alicia. Welcome. All right. So, once again, if you comment all of the things that I'm talking about, especially today, we dive in the book, Be in the Room. We dive really deep into the idea of navigating difficult conversations. We also dive into the idea of, the loneliness that comes with chasing new goals, chasing new success. There's a lot of loneliness that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to changing how you lead yourself and where you want to go. And navigating that loneliness requires structure, requires strategy, and that is what we're going to be breaking down for you today. And we go more in depth in the book. So if you comment book throughout this session, you will be, I forgot to bring it in. You and Trishan, you and Kevin can fight it out. But anyways, so also we got markers today, which means that I'm going to be breaking this down for you. Okay. All right. So the reason why we talk, and Sean's here too. Hey, Sean. All right. The reason why, again, we talk about boundaries as a business, because your brain is a business. I put up a reel a few months ago, I think last month, that talked about how the people you love the most are unintentionally killing your productivity. And here's the reason why. It's because our brains can only manage certain amount of information at a time, which means that if you are looking to lead at higher, more strategic levels, you need to be very protective of your cognitive load. And what happens when you have things that are happening in your world, or when you have unspoken conversations, when you tell people yes, when you really want to say is no, what ends up happening is it starts to create a loop in your brain that is unresolved, right? The conversation that you want to have, but because it makes you uncomfortable to have, you're not having it with the person, but your brain is having that conversation over and over and over and over again, playing out various scenarios, meaning that now this conversation that you are currently avoiding is actually taking up the brain space that you require in order to make bigger moves, right? Hey, Alfie's here. Nice to see you. This is actually as is reducing your cognitive load, which is required for you to actually move outward. Okay, so this is why this this conversation we're going to be having today is like, how do we start to audit that cognitive load, and how do we start to move those conversations, make a decision about those conversations, whether we're going to have them or not have them, and if we're going to have them, how do we structure that conversation in a way that is going to help us to overcome, not overcome, but is going to help us manage some of that resistance that we have towards having uncomfortable conversations. Because part of the reason why Kelly being a bully in the comments. Part of the reason why people avoid these conversations is because they don't want them to come off the wrong way. They don't want to have a negative impact on the other person. They don't want the other person to take the conversation the wrong way or get offended. So if we provide some structure to it, it can at least it can at least help you to overcome that resistance of, I know what I want to say, I just don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say it in a way that is going to help it land and be effective. Now, that being said, when it comes to difficult conversations, here's what you need to know. What you need to know is that you having a difficult conversation, you are not in control of the outcome. Because a difficult conversation that I have with Kevin today could land very differently than if I were to have it tomorrow, based on whatever's going on in his particular world at the time, right? What emotions he's feeling, what pressures he's under, like what news he just got before, all of that, the outcome, how someone reacts or shows up in a hard conversation is not in your control. So the goal here is not necessarily to have a foolproof way to have a conversation that's going to end in everyone holding hands and being nice and no one getting triggered or uncomfortable. That part is not in your control. The goal of this conversation is to help you, give you the tools to narrow that gap. So at the end of the day, because you want to be able to say that, go into a hard conversation, not necessarily, the win isn't about, did I get what I wanted? The win isn't necessarily about the outcome, but the win is, when I leave this conversation, I want to respect myself for having had it. I want to respect myself for how I showed up in that conversation. I can't control the outcome. I can't control how this person chose to show up. But the goal is that you respect yourself. And that tidbit has really helped me in my own level of navigating difficult conversations. Because what I need to ask myself when I'm avoiding a conversation is, if I don't have this conversation, if I don't hit send on this email, will I respect myself? And sometimes the answer is yes. And then I'm like, cool, just not going to have that conversation then. And sometimes the answer is no. And that forces me to hit send, to book a call, to sit somebody down, and at the end of it, walk away and be like, you know what? I did that. I respect myself. So that is what we're going into. So again, letting go of the outcome as the measure of success for a hard conversation, and leaning into the goal being, I need to respect myself for having had this conversation, period. All right. So we talk about cognitive load, and I want to show you how this cognitive load thing works for our brains, right? So when you tell somebody, right? When you tell somebody, let's just say someone asks you to do something and you're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Or maybe, or you say, let me get back to you, or let me see. Here's what we end up doing. We end up creating this loop that has no closure, right? So this circle that has no closure. So the person who you've told, so the person who, when you wanted to say no, but you're like, oh yeah, let me just take that away, or let me think about this, or whatever. While this is happening, one, your brain doesn't have any relief from that conversation because it's trying to figure out this gap. And the other person is actually stressed out too, because this conversation has no closure and they themselves are spending cognitive load trying to figure out this gap. What are they going to say? What happens if they say no? What will I do then? What will happen here? You know what I mean? And this is actually something that happens, you know, if you think about like when you're going for a job interview, when you've asked for a salary increase, anytime you have a conversation and someone needs to take something away and get back to you, you'll notice that your brain hyper focuses on this gap and starts planning for all the different scenarios that could happen as a result of this outcome. Now, I'm not saying that the gap is not necessary. It can be absolutely be necessary. People need to go away. They need to have conversations. People need to check in with themselves. People need to, be able to assess what they've got going on in order to make a valid commitment. However, if you leave this for too long, you create that anxiety. And what a lot of people do is they leave this space for a longer period of time because they know that they're avoiding coming back and closing the loop with something that is unfavorable to the person who's making the ask. You can't get them what they're asking for. You can't deliver the thing when you want to. You actually aren't going to be able to make it to this event, right? Or you don't want to go. So when you actually so the longer you avoid that, not only to protect them from your truth, you are actually increasing their anxiety and yours. So the kinder thing to do is actually to close the loop for them, because two things happen in your brain once that loop is closed. One, a sense of relief comes because your brain's like, okay, now we've closed the loop. And yes, there could be disappointment. And yes, there can be discomfort. However, that part is the next phase of the conversation. That part is also not necessarily in your control. And it's not yours to deal with. Your job is to find ways, when it is in your control, to find ways to notice when you are not closing the loop because you are trying to be nice to somebody, trying to be kind to someone, and recognize that you're actually doing their brain a disservice. You are taking up space in their cognitive load, and you are also taking up space in your own cognitive load. So this is what we need to do. This is why we need to kind of take a step back and say, and do an audit of all of the conversations that you're currently not having, all of the loops that you haven't closed in your brain, all of the conversations that you're rotating over and over in your head. And I want you to think about this right now, because chances are you already know what those conversations are. I know exactly what those conversations are that I'm not having. So what you need, what I'm inviting you to do is to actually list out those conversations. Who are you having them with and what are they about? And then from there, what do you want to say? Just raw. You're not going to hit send on the email, right? Like, you're not going to hit send on the email. You're just going to say the thing. Just say the thing to yourself. I want to tell this person this, that, and the next, right? And then from there, make a decision for yourself. Make a decision on whether or not you're going to have the conversation and close this part of your brain's loop. In other words, decide, I'm actually okay with not having this conversation with this person. And if I'm not going to have it, I can still respect myself, because we don't need to fight every battle, but at least we can close the brain in our own loop, we can close the loop in our own brain and manage with the choice. I'm just not going to have the conversation, and I'm good with that. I'm good with it. If you are going to have the conversation, now, this is where we get into those tools. If you decide, no, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm not going to respect myself if I don't say something. I'm not going to respect myself if I don't ask for what I want. I'm not going to respect myself if I don't set up a boundary. Because boundaries, again, talking about that cognitive load, boundaries are a way of protecting the load that is important to you at this chapter, at this phase in your world. And when people are taking from that load, that's where the boundary comes into play. Okay. So when people are taking from that, are adding distraction or adding noise, are adding, multiple priorities on top of yours, et cetera, or they're constantly flooding you with their needs, not giving you, which is encroaching on the space that you require in order to move your initiatives forward, right? So whether that is the work that is important to you personally, whether that is launching your business, launching a project, whether that is, even like priorities within your team that are important within your team, but for your team's goals, but you keep just taking what everybody else wants you to do. This is where the boundary of the business of boundary is important. So let's talk a little bit about the formula for setting a boundary. Because here's what and I want you to think about boundaries not as a way to control someone else's behavior. Think about boundaries the way that you think about an out of office. Okay. So whenever you're going to a doctor's appointment or you're on vacation, you're basically saying, you can email me all you want. Just know that during this period, I'm going to be out of the office. If it is, and thank you, or you say, thank you for your email. During this period, I'm going to be out of the office, returning on this day, and I will answer your email upon my return, right? And optionally, you can give them an alternative. If this is urgent, you can call me on my mobile. Thinking about a boundary as an out of office is the easiest way to remember how to structure a boundary, because it's not controlling whether or not someone emails you. It's not controlling what kinds of conversations people put into your inbox. You can't control that. All it is controlling, it's communicating what the constraints are. It's communicating what the constraints are, and it's letting them know how you are going to behave, how you are going to show up, how you are going to respond. Email me all you want. I'm not answering until after June 15th, right? So breaking that down, here's the formula in and out of office. You've got V plus C plus B, and then an optional A, okay? So V, value. Thank you for your message. Your email is important to me. Constraint. I'm currently out of the office right now until X day to X day. And B is the behavior. I will return your message once I return. I will get back to your message once I return. And then the optional A is, if this is urgent, you can either reach out to me, you can reach out to this person, you can reach out to this person. A is the optional alternative if you want to. Now, if you think about this in terms of a relationship, even, let's just say you are going into a period where you're trying to be laser focused, right? Like you've got, I'm just as fresh for me, but there was like writing a book, right? Where you just know that you've given yourself a space and time where you need to be laser focused, where you need to clear out some of the excess noise that's happening around you, and you need to be focused in on something you want to move the needle on. So a conversation that I might have with a friend could be like, hey, when they're like, hey, can we come out to this? Can we come out to that? Or, I'm booking a trip for my birthday. I want you to be there. Might sound a little bit like this. Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. And I really I'm happy for you, and I want to be here for you. Like, I don't know what non-cheesy way to say this to your friend. I value our friendship. Just play with that for a second. I don't know how you talk to your friends. I value your friendship. I've never said that to a friend. But for shits and giggles, I'm currently working on a project right now that requires an intense amount of my focus, and I'm going to be locked in for the next month, right? That's the constraint. And the behavior is, I'm going to be locked in for the next month. So I'm going to say no to doing to doing social events. After that month is over, I would really appreciate if you still invited me, because I definitely want to join. And again, put this into a work context too, when you're managing other people's priorities. I hear how important this is to you. I'm currently working on this thing that is due at this time, at this day. And I'm putting a lot of focus on this. So I won't be able to touch this priority for you today. If it isn't urgent, I can look at it tomorrow. How does that sound? And if it can't but again, I don't know what comes after that conversation, but I'm trying to give you essentially what the structure comes. Like, if you have the option to tell people how you are going to change your behavior, and you can provide them with an alternative if that alternative is suitable to whatever situation that you're in. But that's essentially the structure where you can give it. Now, Are people going to be annoyed when you put up a boundary? 100%, because people like certainty. That our brains like to be able to predict what's going to happen. So when all of a sudden you bring in a boundary that disrupts how people normally interact with you, what you normally say, how you normally show up, then yeah, it's a little jarring for people. It's going to be a little bit triggering, and they're going to have that triggered response. That is okay. It's not about you. Their brain is just having a moment where it's trying to problem solve for the fact that you're going to be different now. Give them that moment. Give them that space. And don't use that as a cue to not stand 10 toes down on the thing you put up a boundary for. Now, again, can you negotiate a boundary? 100%. You can have the conversations that are following that in order to say, like, yeah, well, if that doesn't work, then let's talk about what will work. The point is that this is how you enter that conversation. The other thing that we talked about before in terms of navigating difficult conversations, and I'm going to bring this back because this is from episode 1, is we talked a lot about the experience cube by Gervais Bush. So I want to review that for you here because this is a great way if you decide that you want to have a conversation with someone that is a difficult conversation, and maybe it's not related to a boundary, but maybe it's related to something that you are thinking or feeling that you want to say, you want to express, but you don't necessarily know how to say it. This is where this experience cube comes into play. So I'm just going to review it for you one more time, but if you want to go back to a deep dive, it's in episode 1. So, experience cube, also known as the oh, what the fuck cube, right? So, when you're thinking about a situation, a difficult conversation that you want to have, planning it out and getting clear for yourself first on what's actually going on for you. Starting with an observation. What are you observing? What is the tangible, we can't argue about this data that you are observing, right? What does that data make you think? Now, your thought is it's a judgment, it's an assumption, it's a belief, it's an opinion. It is not universal truth. It is based on your experience, how you are interpreting, how your brain and your experiences and your values are interpreting that data, are making meaning of that data, which is why sometimes you ever hear people say, like, it's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? In a sense of there's the observable piece of what you said, and then there's what I heard. There's the story that my brain told of what you said. That's where the thought is. And that's really important that we understand that that is a thought and it is not a universal truth, because too many people believe that their version of the observation is the truth. It's not. So then we get into the feeling, and the feeling is the emotion word. It makes me feel this: worried, frustrated, anxious, proud, happy, curious. I don't know what the word is, but the important thing is that you use a feeling, an emotion word. Too many people try not to use emotion words and try to coat their feeling into, like, disguise their feeling, their thought as a feeling, right? So their thought is they want to say things like, I feel like we're not connecting. That's not a feeling, that's a thought. But when you make something a feeling, the story you're telling yourself is, well, it's not as harsh as a thought. Or you're telling yourself that I can't be wrong for how I feel, right? But and then when someone gets upset because they don't agree with your feeling, they're not necessarily not agreeing with your feeling, they're not agreeing with your judgment or your thought, right? So when you say, I feel like we're not on the same page, and the other person says, I don't know what you're talking about, that's stupid, blah 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 blah, again, you're like, I can't be wrong for how I feel. That's not a feeling. You feel worried because you think that we're not communicating properly and you are worried about something, right? So that's the feeling word. And then the W, which a lot of people miss, is the want. Because a lot of people are very good at talking about what they see, what they like, what they don't like. Whenever I ask someone, what is it that you want? They can default to what they don't want. What is it? We can default to what made us mad to begin with and why we didn't like it. But we have a harder time articulating what we want. because it's vulnerable to say what we want because we're afraid that we might not get it. But then we get angry at other people for not jumping in and giving us what we want, even though we didn't ask for it, right? So this is how you kind of plan out a conversation. Let me use this in real time. So recently I had a business partner who was working with me on this big project. And what I started to notice was that this person wasn't showing up in the way that they said that they were going to. Promises were being missed, deadlines were being missed, and I was getting intensely frustrated and what I was feeling was disappointed. So I sat down and I was like, well, I have to say something, but I didn't want to say something because this person is someone who I've got like a personal relationship with. I brought someone into this project who's actually like someone who I consider like friendly. You know what I mean? So my fear is that I'm going to disrupt the friendship, that they're going to hate me, that, all the things, that reasons why we avoid these hard conversations. But I sat down and I said, okay, let me cube this out because what I do know is that if I say nothing, I won't respect myself. So that means I'm going to cube this out. So I said, here's what I observed. I observed that you told me that this would happen on this day, and that hasn't happened. You told me that this was going to happen on this day, and that hasn't happened. I noticed this thing, and I notice this outcome, right? These are all things that person can go validate and fact check and find the proof to be like, yeah, I did say that. And yeah, she doesn't have it. Yeah, I did say that. And yes, it does say that there. Again, observable means that I haven't given it a thought, a judgment yet. All I've stated are pure facts, which makes me think that you're not prioritizing this project the way that you led me to believe that you would. And that makes me feel really disappointed. It makes me feel hurt. It makes me feel worried. And what I want is a clear scope from here on out of what you will do and what you will not do, right? What is it that you are aligning to do and what will you not do? And what will your communication plan be going forward to ensure that I am kept in the loop and so that we don't repeat these mistakes? See how that worked. Observation, thought, feeling, want. And thinking about your own conversations in this way can help you to navigate for yourself. And sometimes you might even get to the want and realize you actually don't even want to have the conversation. And that's okay too. But at least you are making those decisions from a place of strategy, from a place of choice, versus from a place of fear and avoidance, which is what our brain is naturally wired to do. All right? All right. Woo! That is episode 15 of Being in the Room, How to Stop Shrinking, Start Leading with Purpose. And when we talk about stop shrinking, we are shrinking ourselves when we are avoiding hard conversations. We are shrinking ourselves when we are saying yes when we really want to say no. We are shrinking ourselves when we are communicating in such a way that appeases the other person so that we can avoid short-term discomfort and lose what our long-term vision is. That is how we can shrink ourselves. But when we utilize these tools, when we break it down into formulas, when we do that audit for ourselves, when we recognize that we're actually not doing anybody any favors by not closing the loop, that is when we can move to more powerful conversations, because once again, your level of success is very much so dependent on the number of difficult conversations you are willing to engage in, because that says that you know your value. Having difficult conversations says that you have confidence. Having difficult conversations says that I am laser focused on what I want, and I'm going to endure the discomfort I'm going to endure short-term discomfort in order to go get it, right? That is exactly what it is, why that saying is so powerful and why it is so accurate. So you've got the tools now. Do the audit for yourself. List out all the conversations that you are currently not having, but are taking up some of your cognitive load. Use the cube to decide what you want to say to that person. What do you want to say? Just make it raw. What do I want to say to this person? And then from there, choose, am I going to have the conversation or am I not? Because once again, you can't control the outcome of whatever difficult conversation you enter, but you can control your ability to respect yourself when the conversation is over. So that's what it is. All right. Thank you for the end of week 3. This has been all about leadership identity and leadership power. And next week, we are going to now move into more ownership, authority when it comes to in the room, because now we're navigating ourselves into the spaces. So once we show up in those spaces, how do we ensure that we are leading with executive influence? How do we ensure that we are leading with clarity? And how do we not only get invited into the room, but actually start to leave an impact and create resonance in that space? All right, that's going to be about next week. And thank you all for joining me today. Have a great rest of your day. And don't worry, I will post this one as well as yesterday's. Talk soon.